Hello everybody, my name is Arias. Thanks for joining me on my first presentation. It's about Arcturus Therapeutics. It's a first look. First, let's get the disclaimer. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Always do your own research and don't just buy stocks because some guy on the internet said so. And I take no responsibility for what happens with this stock. It is the fifth largest holding in ARC's Genomic Revolution ETF. It's at 4.7% of their portfolio, relatively large stake. So what does Arcturus do? That's, after all, why will you invest in the company? So they're in the race for the coronavirus vaccine. Maybe not one of the leaders that you've heard about in the United States, but they're definitely a player in the world stage. They've only got $1 billion market cap. They're located in San Diego, which is sort of a biotech hotbed with companies like Illumina and Inovio there as well. There's can be comparable. Some of the companies that are doing sort of the same things are Moderna and Inovio, with some definite differences that we'll highlight later in the presentation. They have two technological platforms that make this company very interesting, or what they call Lunar, a proprietary lipid nanoparticle delivery platform, and STARR, self-replicating and self-transcribing mRNA technology. So how do their medicines work? Just the quick and dirty. Their substances is placed in the body. Some of them are injected intravenously or intramuscularly. Some of them are even inhaled, like their treatment for CF. The lunar delivery system delivers the particle to the target cells, and then once they're delivered to the cells, they are enveloped in the cell. The lunar molecule bursts, which delivers the enclosed molecules to the cell, such as mRNA, siRNA, and any other type of treatment that they come up with in the future. Here's a video from Arcturus themselves about how the lunar delivery platform works.
Injection, the lunar particles carrying the RNA drug travel in the bloodstream to the liver. The lunar technology then sheds the protective surface, allowing the particle to adhere or stick to the membrane of the diseased cell. The delivery technology enters the cell through a process called transfection, resulting in the lunar particle being held inside an endosome. As the endosome ages, it becomes more and more acidic. The acidity activates the lunar particle, resulting in endosome rupture and subsequent release of the RNA drug into the cytoplasm, where nature's machinery takes over. The RNA drug is naturally converted to pharmaceutical protein by ribosomes in the cell, enabling the cell to heal itself, indeed, enabling the patient to naturally cure their own disease.
So now that we have the explanation, some of the key takeaways from this lunar delivery system is it safely and effectively delivers all types of RNA medicines to the cell. It does this because it's not a viral vector, so it won't develop any immune response. It can be delivered to different types of cells, a couple of different types of the livers, and that sort of makes it unique. Many other treatments struggle to deliver medicines to these cells. The eye cells and the muscle cells and the lung cells are also potential delivery places. Moderna has similar technology, and Arcturus is set apart by its ability to deliver to different types of cells. The lunar delivery platform is also biodegradable, so it makes it easy to repeat doses without harming the individual. Here's a presentation on how the STARR technology works from Arcturus themselves.
Of coronaviruses that can cause serious respiratory disease. Arcturus Therapeutics and Duke NUS Medical School are developing a COVID-19 vaccine based on the company's lunar and STARR technologies. After injection, the lunar particles carrying the mRNA vaccine shed their protective surface, allowing them to enter the cell through a process called transfection, resulting in the lunar particle being held inside an endosome. As the endosome ages, it becomes more and more acidic. The acidity activates the lunar particle, resulting in endosome rupture and subsequent release of the mRNA vaccine into the cytoplasm, where nature's machinery takes over. The self-transcribing and replicating mRNA, or STARR mRNA, triggers rapid and prolonged antigen expression, resulting in protective immunity. Arcturus COVID-19 vaccine works in very low dose because of sustained protein expression, providing a superior immune response protecting the individual from the coronavirus.
With that explanation of STAR, I think this is really what sets Arcturus apart and makes it an attractive investment to me. When the RNA is delivered to its cell, it replicates itself. This exposes the cell to much more of the spike protein over a longer time. Due to that, it will confer much higher antibodies. We've seen 30 times protein expression versus regular RNA by exposing the cell to much more spike protein. It won't need a booster shot as far as we know at this point. This makes logistics simpler as you only have to distribute one vaccine versus two, which would be a huge advantage to the countries that are distributing this vaccine. They also use an extremely low dose compared to other vaccines. Just as a comparison, Moderna's vaccine is, I believe, 100 micrograms, whereas Arcturus is only 1 microgram, so 1/100th of dose to get 30 times the protein expression. So this is why I pick Arcturus as an investment, is because of this technology. So we just went over many of these. One of the other advantages is it draws a bigger immune response in terms of both T cells and antibodies. This differs from regular mRNA vaccines, which tend to have a little bit less T cell expression than antibodies, much smaller dose. This means that 1 kilogram of this, the size of about 2 of your fists, could vaccinate 1 billion people at 1 microgram a dose, which is what Arcturus is planning to do at this point. Of course, there's manufacturing cost benefits if you only have to manufacture 1/100th as much. They have proof of concept of both of these technologies already. This isn't just applicable to the coronavirus. This has potential to be a viable vaccine for many other contagious diseases. And so this is what their long-term advantage boils down to me, is this STAR technology. Of course, all this boils down to this company could help save millions of lives. And I think that's a very important thing when you're investing in a company, to believe in the mission and not only save lives, but improve the quality of many people's lives as well. Their core goals that they state in their 10K are to leverage their lunar technology to generate many programs and partners that could be very lucrative for them in the future. Use lunar to develop treatments for rare lung diseases and liver diseases, which they're already on the way to doing that. Collaborate with the Duke National University of Singapore and the Singapore government to address the COVID-19 crisis and to develop nucleic acid knowledge to maintain their advantage over other companies. So here to look at their pipeline right now. The one highlighted in red is the COVID-19 vaccine, but that's far from the only program they have. Their lunar OTC, orthene transcarbamylase deficiency, is already in phase 1B in the United States and phase 1 in New Zealand. It's a very rare disease, but they have the potential to help lots of people with this treatment. They also have the lunar CF, the cystic fibrosis treatment, which we will go into that in a little bit more detail. They look to file to start trials for that in 2021. And they also have some other rare cardiovascular disease and metabolic diseases in the works for the future. Let's start talking about their COVID-19 vaccine and the specific status of that. They're working with the Duke University and the National University of Singapore and the Economic Development Board. Singapore has a lot of experience with coronaviruses, having gone through the SARS outbreak in 2002 and then the MERS outbreak later. So they have more knowledge about how to deal with these sort of things. They've already started their human trials there. They're in phase 1 of 2. Once they've completed these trials, they have a chance to supply it to anybody else in the world that needs it. They don't have a deal with the US at this point. They do have a deal with Israel, though, which would be about 9 million doses, in addition to the 5 million doses with Singapore. Their technology is superior to other mRNA companies with using just a vastly smaller dose and getting much higher protein expression and only using one shot, which gives them a huge advantage going forward. Some of their other programs are the lunar OTC and the CF. These are the ones that are coming up pretty closely in the future. With the OTC, it's a rare liver disease caused by the loss of OTC enzyme, causes dangerous buildup of ammonia in the blood. And there are only treatments right now to mitigate the symptoms. However, this treatment would totally fix the problem and drastically improve the lives of these people who have this disease. And fortunately, they already have a proof of concept in mice, and their regulatory filings state that they have already started phase 1 trials in the US and phase 1 trials in New Zealand. Their cystic fibrosis treatment is also on the way. They're planning to file for an IND in 2021. They already have proof of concept in rodent models. Right now, cystic fibrosis, there's treatment for it for some types, but not all. None of them cure the disease, they only treat the symptoms. Cystic fibrosis is slightly more prevalent than the OTC, which gives them a bigger market opportunity. And they're, of course, supported by the CF Foundation, which is very good for funding and research purposes. Now let's move on to some of their collaborations. They've got a lot of collaborations and a lot in the works. Some of the most pressing ones are the Ultragenyx filing for glycogen storage disease type 3. They plan to file for that in 2020 to start trials there. But they also have some other big partners, Johnson & Johnson for hepatitis B vaccine or treatment. They're also partnering with Takeda to tackle NASH disease. Johnson & Johnson being a huge healthcare provider in the US and Takeda being the biggest in Japan. They also say they have some deals with other large pharma and large animal health pharma that are in the works. And overall, with their collaborations, they have over $1 billion in milestones and royalties available to them. Let's talk about some of the risks. I'm only going to talk about it for one slide, but obviously, this being a drug discovery company, they are very speculative. These drugs could, in theory, not work, and that would obviously be very negative for their stock price. Some of the other risks are they lose money, $26 million in 2019 and $22 million in 2018, so the losses seem to be ramping up. They've even ramped up spend to $10 million a quarter in Q2 2020. That's obviously a big increase in spending that we should be mindful of. Again, these drugs could fail. They're new, innovative drugs. There's nothing to say that they will be successful, although they have been proven in animal models at this time. Another thing is many competitors are going after the space. Moderna, Inovio, and many other private companies are going after this. They definitely face fierce competition, especially from companies like Moderna with much larger R&D budgets at this time and a lot more support. And they seem to be a little bit more aggressive than Arcturus has. They do rely on third parties for manufacturing and development of drugs, especially with all of those collaboration deals. And just like all drug companies, they will eventually lose patent protection. Now let's move on to talk about their management. Their CEO is Joe Payne. He's the owner, operator, and co-founder. He spent 20 years developing drugs at Merck, DuPont, Bristol Myers, Squibb, and others. He's been part of filing for 40 publications and patents, and he graduated magna cum laude at BYU with a degree in chemistry. And when you listen to this guy talk, he describes himself as a scientist. It's exactly what I want to see from a CEO. He comes off as somebody who is very involved in the process, and he's not just a manager. He wants to see this company succeed and help billions. Now, they called out Dr. Steve Hughes as their chief development officer. He was hired at Arcturus in early 2020. He's had a lot of experience in drug development and many other places, leading, revolutionary sort of work. His most recent position was at Organovo and led development work there, and previously led teams at Ionis and Biogen. He was specifically called out in their 10K as somebody who's very important for their future in terms of leading their team forward. Now, moving on to their financial status, their stock has run a lot this year with their involvement in the coronavirus research, but I believe this is justified for a couple of reasons. One, I think mRNA vaccines, they haven't been prevalent in the past, but because of the coronavirus, it has sped up the timeline for when these will become approved and accepted, and for when they become more prevalent for many other types of diseases in the future. As of June 30th, 2020, they have a very solid cash position with $136 million in cash and only 15 in long-term debt. Leaves them with net cash of about $121 million. Even with their elevated spend of about $10 million a quarter, that would still give them about 3 years of cash on hand to get their drugs to the market. And with their stock up so much in the past year, it's really beneficial for them in terms of being able to raise money in the future. Speaking of raising money, their recent raises, they've raised $10 million from the Singapore Economic Development Board for the COVID vaccine, $75 million for a $17 stock offering, $7.6 million when Ultragenyx options exercised at $16 a share, and they had a huge raise at $186 million for stock offering at $53 a share. And here's some more financial data. In 2019, before the Rona and all of that started, they had $20 million in collaboration revenue. However, this is down big in Q2 of 2020, I think because of the coronavirus impact. R&D and G&A in 2019 were at $33 million and $12 million respectively, and they've remained relatively stable in Q2 of 2020. Their net loss in 2019 was $26 million, but that could drastically increase in 2020. As I said, they were spending about $10 million a quarter. Let's move on to why I think this company has big potential, and it all comes down to their unique platform. They have many diseases that are targetable with their mRNA, in addition to just cystic fibrosis and OTC deficiency. And they have the best technology to potentially vaccinate against these diseases with having such a beneficial cost structure due to their lower dose, higher protein expression, and need for only one dose. This could be a vaccine potentially for diseases that run wild all over the world, like malaria or dengue fever. And it includes the potential to quickly address any future viral outbreaks similar to the coronavirus in the future. It's important to have technology to address these in the future, and Arcturus has the best technology to potentially address these. They have the best cost structure with an extremely low single-shot vaccine. Additionally, they're already in partnerships with J&J and Takeda, which are huge pharma companies that could take their technology and distribute it at scale for massive profits for both of them. And they have plenty of cash to get the company to market with their drugs, as seen by the past capital raises. Potentially, as I see it, they're a buyout candidate. Some of these companies like J&J, who are potentially trying to expand, don't always do it with internal expansion. They a lot of times do it by acquiring other companies, and Arcturus is a great candidate for that with such a small market cap. And now let's speculate a little bit about their future valuation, what kind of gains we can get from this. Moderna is valued at $28 billion. That would be 28x from here approximately, right? That's a pretty huge gain. Now, Moderna seems to be a lot more aggressive in what diseases they're going after. They seem to be going after much more common diseases, but Arcturus has the same sort of potential to do any of that, especially with all of their partners. As of now, they have $1 billion lined up in potential revenue from milestones they could hit, which would justify their valuation today. Another thing that people aren't considering necessarily is that the CEO has speculated that COVID-19 could be a seasonal disease, and while that would be awful for humanity to have to live with this and live with the death toll that would bring with it, Arcturus could be part of a seasonal vaccine for this disease that could bring a lot of profits to the company in the future. Also, to get them through their development process into market, they might get a huge injection of cash from the coronavirus vaccine sales. And that's what I'm going to focus on here is the coronavirus vaccine sales. The OTC and the CF treatments are a little bit further off in the future and not as pressing right now as the coronavirus is, obviously. So they already have deals to provide the vaccine for Singapore and Israel, which is about 14 million people. And to get an idea of what kind of prices other companies are charging for this, Moderna is charging $32 to $37 a dose, while Pfizer's charging close to $19.50 a dose. Moderna has said that they're going to target about a 50% profit margin, while Pfizer's profit margin is going to be a little bit lower. So to model out this, I'm going to use if Arcturus charges the $19.50 a dose, as well as the average between the Moderna price point and the Pfizer price point. And then also, let's say that Arcturus charges the same as Moderna for their vaccine. Now, if they only treat the people that they already have vaccine deals for in Singapore and Israel, at $19 a dose, it's $273 million. $25 a dose, that's $350 million in revenue. And at $35, it's $490 million in revenue. So that would leave somewhere between 135 to 245 million in profit, with their cash being at about 121 million net cash. That would double their cash at least. So that's a huge cash injection, give them a much longer runway to get to market. We're not done with the speculation yet. The previous slide considers only if they vaccinate 0.16% of the global population. Let's say they were able to get 1% of the population. That would mean about 87 million doses. At $19.50 a dose, it's 1.7 billion in revenue. At $25 a dose, it's 2.2 billion in revenue, and at $35 a dose, it's $3 billion in revenue. At a 50% profit margin, that would leave them about 0.85 billion to 1.5 billion in profit. Now, there are about 13 major companies racing for the coronavirus vaccine. So if they were to get 1/13 of the population, or about 7.5%, about 570 million doses. And if they were able to sell that many doses, at $19.50 a dose, it would be 11.1 billion. At $25 a dose, it's 14.2 billion. And at $35 a dose, it would be about 20 billion. At 50% profit margin, that leaves about 5.6 to 10 billion in profit. And that would be just from one round of it. If it ends up being seasonal, this could be a potential recurring revenue stream. And they could potentially even increase their market share, as their technology is the best technology to tackle this because of its single dose and higher protein expression. So overall, they could capture market share over time if it ends up being seasonal. Looking at this from a valuations perspective, even if we use just a price to earnings ratio of around a 20, 5 billion in profit would get them to 100 billion in market cap. That would be huge in terms of the gains. That would be 100x gain from here. So thank you for watching. That concludes my presentation. Obviously do your own research. Thanks for joining me, and have a good day.